Organization. People Daily up next. Radical proposal to cut Teachers Service Commission powers, change constitution to check wide mandate given to teachers, employers, task force recommends in draft report, and also team whose tenure ends in 10 days also want all teacher colleges to have one CEO and board in reforms. That is a story that you want to follow on page 6. It's all about reforms in the Teacher Service Commission. That is on People Daily on page 6 of the publication today. Ruto drums up support for new taxes amid protest. President pushes for finance bill in tour of Western as Omtata threatens to go to court. Also, we have the Business Daily split puzzle of scores in hiring new NSSF boss. On panelist score, or one panelist, I should say, scores him 26, another 95 in same interview. NSSF has over 284.98 billion shillings investment portfolio. And this is a story that you want to follow on page 2 of the Business Daily this morning. It says details of scores with huge variances and suspended interviews have lifted the lead on a major split among the National Social Security Fund board members that preceded the hiring of new management or managing trustee in a recruitment insiders claim had external interference. It continues on page 2, as I've mentioned, of the Business Daily. CBK reveals cheapest and most expensive Kenyan banks. Small lenders such as First Community Bank, Ecobank of Kenya, and HF Bank dominate the list of banks offering lower interest rates in the latest regulatory disclosure that puts large players such as Absa and Equity Group among those with the steepest rates. You can follow the story on page 2 of the Business Daily this morning. Looking at the side of the IMF, terms for new 75 billion shillings Kenya loan pegged on reforms, and fish prices set to increase by 50% on new import taxes. The cost of fish will rise by 50% if Parliament approves a proposal to introduce excess duty at 100,000 shillings per ton to shield the local market from cheaper Chinese imports. Also, NCB adds 17 million shillings new Fuliza customers. 17 million new Fuliza customers, I should say, not shillings there. And that story is tucked on page 14 of the Business Daily this morning. In Rwanda, 220 Rwandan francs needed there. That's their budget to address urgent financial gaps. 52 gaps amounting to over 173 billion shillings should be catered for at the beginning of the next fiscal year. That story continues on page 2 of the New Times. And also the East African this week, still following the attack on Uganda by Al-Shabaab. They are seeking answers officials describe as sad and unfortunate news of deadly ambush in Somalia base. And this story continues on page 6 of the East African. That will reveal what really happened regarding this attack. And power play, President Yoweri Museveni and Tanzania's Samia Suluhu Hassan at Kikagati in Isingiro district, Uganda, where they commissioned a joint hydro power project on May the 25th, 2023. The power dam is built on River Kagera at the border between Uganda and Tanzania. Also, irresistible rise of the Dar es Salaam port and Ruto Uhuru Rao. Chaos looms large. Fears of business, logistics disruption as Azimio leader threatens mass action. That story on page 5 of the East African this morning. This is how the dailies are looking today. President William Ruto faces build-up of political hurricane in the coming days from threats of street protest by a resurgent opposition, a former president who has refused to leave political stage, and Kenyans who have rejected new tax measures few days to reading of the budget. And here again, he's seeking 2 billion shillings to globetrot, according to the Daily Nation this morning. But these also events were happening yesterday in Busia, in interdenominational church service. Let's just listen to what the president had to say regarding also the finance bill and the house levy as well.
The Finance Bill 2023 continues eliciting mixed reactions countrywide, even as President William Ruto remains steadfast in demystifying it to Kenyans. While in Busia County Sunday, during an interdenominational and Thanksgiving service, the head of state said it is unfortunate that some leaders are deliberately misleading Kenyans on the bill, yet those targeted are the employed cadre.
Niwaulize watu wa Busia, kama nyinyi mnatusaidia kulipa mshahara ya mwalimu, ya daktari, ya MCA, ya mjumbe, ya rais, tukitoa 3% ya pesa yetu ndio hata nyinyi mkue na kazi, iko makosa? Wacheni mchezo hiyo bwana, hapana.
The bill is currently at the public participation stage, and several stakeholders have presented their memoranda to the Finance Committee of the National Assembly, even as the Azimio outfit sustains their reservations. The President and Kenya Kwanza leaders, however, hold the economy is in shambles, and the bill will go a long way to heal it.
I've already prepared a petition to go to court. But when I heard you are coming to Busia, I did not file it last week. I held on. I pray that we look at this bill. If we can avoid having to go and fight in court, we avoid. But if people are coming here to say that everything is okay and what have you, then next week we shall be fighting in court, and it's bad for friends to fight.
Munizungumzie huyu seneta wetu tafadhali, Bwana Omutata. Wewe sasa unataka kunipeleka kotini, na ile kazi mimi nafanya ni kupangia watu hawa ajira. Kwani sasa utaki hawa watu wapateko kazi? Please, Okia, tafadhali.
Kenya Kwanza further calling out Azimio leadership for the recent threat to write to the United Nations over the country's political situation and secession talks.
Nimekuwa mahali mbali na nikasikia kiongozi mmoja anasema hii Kenya anataka kuandikia UN waigawe apate sehemu yake. Muko tayari Kenya kugawa?
Ati Kenya iwe mbili. Tafadhali, let us not go that route as leaders. Let us remain united. We are talking about integration, not disintegration.
Busia and Malaba, despite being border towns, have lagged behind, and to revitalize them, the head of state has dangled a bag of goodies, including constructing dams in the floods-prone area, construction of a dual highway to ease the traffic snarl-up, and construct an industrial park. Its agricultural potential, according to the head of state, should be tapped in and make it a leading rice producer, besides halting importation of fish for the benefit of local products.
Sio kawaida watu wa mpaka duniani mzima kuwa na hali ya uchumi ambayo haifaidhi wananchi kama hapa Busia. Na saa ingine inawapatia wasiwasi, kwa sababu hii ni kama gateway ya biashara in Eastern Central.
Na rais wetu William Ruto amenituma mimi Noah kuwaomba, tafadhali ingieni kwa safina, tafadhali mafuriko isiwamalize. Mheshimiwa Ojamong, ingia kwa safina. Hii Kiswahili mingi unaongea hapa, uongelee ndani ya safina tafadhali, tusiongelee nje, mafuriko ikuje muzame.
President William Ruto is out to demystify the Finance Bill 2023, calling on the members of parliament to pass the bill, terming it as a panacea to the ailing economy. Alan Ochanda, KTN News.
And even the politics of housing levy continues. The president has been very categorical that he's not rowing back on that particular project, and he is telling Raila Odinga it is unstoppable. Listen in.
Speaking in Muiben sub-county in the county of Uasin Gishu during a fundraiser, the leaders vowed to support the proposed house levy and explained to their supporters that the 3% housing levy had been capped at 2,500 shillings.
Ni kama unataka nyumba ujichangie kwa mapenzi yako. Sisi ambao tuko mumetuajiri na mnatulipa mshahara, tukate ili nyinyi mfaidike. Sasa nyinyi nikiuliza watu wa Muiben, mnataka tukatwe ama tusikatwe? Tukatwe ama tusikatwe? Tukatwe. Hiyo 3%. Hiyo 2500 mbunge wenyu akatwe, si ndio? Ni kurudisha mkono kidogo. Na mimi nikatwe, si ndio?
Hii jambo la housing, mambo ya 3% levy ambaye sio kodi. Hao wapinzani wangependa sana kuambia wananchi na wafanyikazi wa taifa la Kenya eti hiyo ni kodi. Hiyo sio kodi. Kuna tofauti ya kodi na fund. Hiyo pesa ambaye itatumika kwa ujenzi ya manyumba katika taifa la Kenya, kwanza kando na manyumba itabuni nafasi za kazi kwa vijana wa taifa la Kenya.
Kwa mara ya kwanza rais amesema hatutaendelea kuishi kwa deni. Kwa maana mali imefika sasa deni ya nchi ya Kenya, if we are not going to be careful tukue wa ukweli na kujisimamia kupitia ile ushuru ambao tunaweka, we are risking taking our country to defaulting the debt. Na mnajua wakati nchi imeshindwa kulipa deni, hiyo nchi imenyakuliwa na imetawalwa na wale ambao wanaleta deni. Sisi kama Wakenya tukubali kusimama na rais kwamba tuweze kuleta ushuru wetu.
They asked teachers unions to drop their hardline position and support the bill, which they said was a blessing in disguise.
Mahali tuko tumeambiwa prescription for making ourselves self-reliant is to make sure tunadungwa quinin, na quinin ni finance bill na housing levy. Mnasikia vizuri? Na housing levy is not a tax. Tunataka kuambia walimu, we need to tell ourselves the truth. Wacha tujitegemee. Kulipa ushuru ni kujitegemea. Sawa sawa? And that is why we are saying hiyo proposal yenye iko finance bill, sisi kama wajumba wa Kenya Kwanza, we are going to support it 100%.
Him space to implement the plan, the Kenya Kwanza plan. Those side shows hatutaki.
Instead of opposing, they should be telling us which towns they have identified to build the affordable housing. Because every constituency has been given 200. So msidanganywe hapa mnaambiwa story sijui itakuwa wapi. Hiyo kama ikifika Muibeni hapa, watu ya Nairobi watakuja kununua. Si ni watu wa Muibeni hapa? Si ni maaslas?
This comes as Mavoko lawmaker Patrick Makau asked the state to declare the legal framework of the contentious housing levy.
Nauliza, wewe utanunua nyumba kama hujakula kitu? This is supposed to be voluntary. Hii pesa inaenda wapi? Kwa hivyo tupewe the legal framework. Hii pesa ikiokotwa itakuwa inaenda wapi? Don't be cheated.
It now remains to be seen which way the proposed house levy as Kenyans continue to debate. Elvis Kosgei, KT News, in the county of Uasin Gishu.
Well, that is the toing and froing on the housing levy. But let's just listen in to what also the Deputy President had to say regarding the finance bill and what is the way forward.
Days after President William Ruto called on Kenya Kwanza lawmakers to pass the controversial Finance 2023 bill in totality, the legislators are determined to convince Kenyans to back the government's plans of radical tax proposals and public debt plans. Sunday, leaders who accompanied Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua to a church service in Thika, Kiambu County, celebrating the retirement of Bishop Julius Gitau at AIPC Church, drummed up support on the bill, to be precise, the housing levy that has caused an uproar among Kenyans.
Kama niko na nyumba kama mimi, sitaki kununua nyumba, hiyo pesa after 7 years naweza pewa nirudishiwe with interest. Wewe kama uko hapa kama askari, county commander, arudishiwe yake.
Today, I can't recall a president who, for every 100 shilling ambaye inaokotwa kwa ushuru, more than 75% inaenda kwa kulipa deni. Unabakia na 25%, ulipe walimu, upepe pesa kwa counties, ufanye maendeleo. Na ndio hiyo ukijaribu kuweka ushuru kidogo, unasikia vile kelele inatoka kwa mtu yote wa kawaida.
Uhuru Kenyatta alikuwa na nafasi ya kujenga manyumba. Lakini kwa hiyo miaka 5 alitengeneza only 18,000 housing units. But within 8 months of your government, Your Excellency, you have been able to launch 36,000 housing units in our republic. twice or even twice of what Uhuru Kenyatta managed to do in 5 years.
Further, the leaders who vowed to pass the bill asked the opposition to stop playing populist politics, as the bill will bring stability of the economy. The budget will be read on June 15th after MPs resume from their recess.
Your Excellency, I was a former chairman of budget, the immediate former chairman of budget, and I know the situation of the economy of this country. I know that without us getting more taxing, not getting more tax, without us getting more revenue, it means that you are going to borrow. Housing fund is not tax. You are only told need 3% of your salary as long as it's not beyond 2,500. Unaambiwa hapa, achana na hiyo kitu, ni con game. Hapana, na unaambiwa pesa itapotea. Hii pesa haingii kwa consolidated account ya serikali. Iko na structure mrefu sana ndio ifanye hizo kazi. Kwa hivyo on housing, tafadhali, afadhali hata muambiwe kitu ingine. Mtu asikudanganye. It is the prerogative of the government to set goals for the country.
Leaders also called on former President Uhuru Kenyatta to keep off politics and enjoy his much-deserved retirement.
You are very wealthy man. You have everything a man can ever want in life. You have had everything in life. God has blessed you with everything. The people of Kenya have been so good to you. How can you dare set up our children for death and destruction?
Grace Nganga, KTN News, Nairobi.
Right, looking at the state of a nation there, the editorial cartoon that we had in the dailies as well. This is how the map of Kenya is being treated right now by the opposition leader Raila Odinga, seeking secession, as you've heard from some of the legislators that they want a secession of the country. And you can see who are walking away with the shareholders' medal there, which is the shareholder-only medal. That is according to Victor. Also, we do have the controversial medal as well, the OPEC award, the Transparency Award, and recently Transparency International, they recalled the award they had given to the former, or the DPP of, that is the Director of Public Prosecutions, Noordin Haji, as you may be aware. And this is the Daily Nation today, and the editorial cartoon also there, according to Iga, is about housing. Is the math really adding up, right? 1 + 1 is equals to 2+. Well, I'll leave it for you to decipher there. I just want to introduce our panelists this morning. We have Yusuf Hassan, who is a member of Parliament, Kamukunji. Also, we have with us Senator Okongo Mogini, who is the senator of Nyamira, and we have a CAS Wilson Sossion, with the CAS Tourism. Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
First of all, I want to thank and extend my warm, hearty welcome to you, Yusuf Hassan. You've been missing in action for quite a while, right? Welcome back.
I am pleased to be back.
Fantastic. And I want to also welcome back Senator Okongo Mogini as well. He's been missing in action.
No, not bad. Morning, first morning.
Morning to you.
Yeah, I think we went live together with you, so you should not be saying I've been missing in action. It was a wild break.
I came back last week, you weren't here as well. Sossion at least has been here all along. Good morning, Sossion.
Good morning to you, Diba.
Thank you.
I'm not aware whether political leaders ever take leave.
They ever take leave?
On duty. They could have been on duty.
He's talking about recess in Parliament. Yeah, the resumption is this week.
No, in recess.
But recess are very busy in committees.
Recess, you go to your people and console them a bit. So Sio knows he has been in Parliament. So I was out of town most of the past 3 weeks. So we were on recess, but we are now back. We resumed last week. So we are on.
You're on?
Yeah, we are on now.
How are the people of Nyamira?
Well, things could be better. The economy is not doing very well. They are choking. I think the biggest problem facing my people, I don't know about Kamukunji and the count of Bomet, but in Nyamira, the cost of living has really skyrocketed, the bulb. And everybody you meet, they're agonizing on how to survive. Just the basics. not about where to go and buy a nice shirt, but just how to survive, to meet the basics. There are jokes, there are people now telling us that buying a packet of packaged 2 kilos of sugar is equivalent to buying a bag of cement. So something that has never happened in the country. So life is really difficult, and I don't know what solution the government of the day will provide, because the world all over, you must care for the vulnerable. You must care for those in society that don't enjoy good incomes, and you see how you cushion them. You go to many developed countries, you go to Australia, the government tries to tax those who have, to ensure that those who don't have don't die from hunger or from lack of food. You go to the US, there is a program to give food subsidies to those who are not in employment, and even also give them money, what they call social support program. I saw that unemployment has risen by another 3 million Kenyans who are just out there seeking to join the job market. So things are not very good. And then finally, speaking to the people we represent, the Mwananchi, this thing you call housing tax, very unpopular with Kenyans, both unemployed and the employed. There is fear that the cost of living will get worse with the proposal to increase VAT by a further 8%, because the projection is that that will raise the cost of fuel by another 12 to 13 shillings. And people fear genuinely that that will have a spiral effect in increasing the price of many goods in the market. And also a number of services will go up, including transport on border, which is the most common form of transport for our people in the rural areas. So really, when you talk to Kenyans, there is a lot of desperation out there, and they think that their government is not listening to them. So I think if I was to talk to the good administration, let them put their ear on the ground, listen to what Mwananchi needs on the ground. You know, a teacher gave me an example of this talk going around, that the housing levy is not a tax. We are just taking more money from your payslip. Why are you complaining? It's not a tax. And they told me that's what a king in France called Louis XVI told the citizens when they were telling him, we are angry, we cannot afford bread. He was not able to communicate with them. He thought these guys are looking for something better. So he told them, if you don't want bread, why can't you go to the shops and buy cakes? What in essence, what they're telling him is, we don't have money to buy bread. He thought they have the money, they were spoiled for choice. So what teachers are telling me is, they are telling the president to look at their payslip. They don't have this option of giving out more money to the government, either to save for them or to build houses for them. And one asked me, by the time he contributes the 3% housing levy, he has already been taxed. That money is coming net of his income. After you are paid, pay as you earn, and then you make another contribution for the housing levy. And he's saying he's due to retire. That particular teacher told me he's due to retire in another 4 years. So he will never really benefit from this housing scheme. And he's asking, why is he being told that when he will go for the money that he's being told is a saving, he's being told that he will again pay tax on it. So that is tantamount to double taxation. So Dibal, let's borrow from what happens in developed jurisdictions. When we have an issue like this that is very, very contentious, that you can see is really dividing the country down the middle, we should sit on a round table and discuss. Biden and McCarthy, Speaker of House of Representatives in the US, have been discussions for the last 3 weeks. In fact, you saw Biden cut his trip. He was meant to travel down to Australia. He cut his trip, went back to the US to engage in a bipartisan discussion with the House Speaker, McCarthy. And they have agreed that fine, will allow the government to raise the debt ceiling, but on the understanding, just imagine, on the understanding that there will be no new taxes on the American people. because they are appreciating that there is recession, globally. Why can't we as a country also sit down and discuss? I've not had any Kenyan, it's my final point, I've not had any Kenyan having a problem with the taxing people like my friend Sosion here, who is going to earn $1 million, the 35% tax. That's not controversial. I've not had Kenyans raising any finger. But the taxes that are going to be impactful on the low cadre Kenyan, the Kenyan who is already choking under the high cost of living, we cannot be so insensitive to say that we will push this down the throat of Kenyans. This is a matter that really needs to be debated, the pro and cons of it, and then we make a decision. I underline, we make a decision that is not populist, but is in the best interest of Kenyans.
Okay, let's hear from Mheshimiwa Yusuf regarding this, the latest developments. We have almost 70 lobby groups. The last time I checked, I think it was ticking at 66 right now, who also are stoutly opposed to, first of all, the finance bill itself, primarily the housing levy 3% as it is. This is the voices of organization. Lately, Uvado Kenya Association of Manufacturers also adding their voice to it, saying that businesses will be adversely affected if this is steamrolled, and they'll have no choice other than to scale down on their staff as well. What is your opinion on this? Because I think now it rests with Parliament. And we see this is where we have bugbears and fears regarding legislators who sometimes in their heart they're not really for this particular bit, but because of where the political position they're taking, they're shoehorned to actually pass this particular bill.
Well, let me first of all say that the financial bill is a big bill. It has a lot of things, both good and bad. And therefore, when you focus on it without breaking it down into parts, you create a lot of confusion. And these people that you have mentioned are interest groups. In a democratic society, interest groups go out and they promote issues that are of special interest to them. And they have every right to do that. But I come from a constituency which has got a serious housing problem. A constituency which has one of the largest slums, informal settlements. And as an MP, I campaigned on the platform of affordable housing, to be able to provide public housing to our community, to be able to get rid of the squalid slum conditions that exist in our urban centers. And therefore, I see the housing development policy and the housing development fund as a positive thing, in the sense that I feel that is the only way that the people of Kamkunji can get out of the extreme poverty that exists among the Middle-East, and housing is an integral part of that. We must also look at the fact that 6.4 million Kenyans live in slum conditions. 90% of those, including the people of Kamkunji, live in rented accommodation. 60% live in this informal settlements. And therefore, you need some intervention from the state to be able to move into that sector and make a difference. And how do you do it? There are three ways perhaps that you can help in public health, public housing improvement. One is to get grants, from foreign countries, donors and so on. And which means you have to continue to beg and get support from countries and create dependency. And in most cases, we have been doing that for the last 60 years of our independence. And we have not been able to tackle the triple scourges of poverty, diseases, and illiteracy. The only other option, therefore, is to create a local fund which we contribute to ourselves as a country and as a people. And we create a development plan that can change the housing equation in our country. And if you look at the current government's policy, is that the housing plan that would be funded by the housing levy would, create an opportunity for 1.1 trillion housing development project. It will create opportunities for employment, for example. Large number of our youth will be employed. In our particular case, we already have soon the Shaurimoyo affordable housing. We expect many more others to eliminate the slums in our midst. The second element is stimulating the economy. And I come from a neighborhood which has got the largest Jua Kali in the country, the Kamkunji Jua Kali. And these are people who are going to benefit by providing material to the housing project, including doors, including windows, artisans and experts, local experts. And then the third element of this particular housing project is creating an opportunity for people to get decent housing, to be able to buy housing. So this particular project for me, the housing development policy, and is very close to my heart because it will have an impact in my constituency. It will improve the quality of life in our neighborhood, and it will create housing opportunities for people who are now living in very, very bad housing conditions. And so we have to make a choice as a country, whether we would allow an extreme poverty and slums in our midst, when we have the ability to be able to contribute to change in our society by creating affordable housing for those people who do not have. So that is why I think...
Well, I wanted just to latch on the issue.
So, but there is other elements of the finance bill,
fantastic,
which are good or bad.
Oh, yeah, we should look.
We need to look at those things bit by bit. And if there are areas where we really need to change and amend, let's do so. And when it comes to the floor of the House, those are some of the things we'll be considering.
So the government had also a handy opportunity to try and stimulate the housing upgrading program like the slums that we have in Majengo area. We had also Kibera slums as well. But also, looking back to that, it seems it never took off. And a lot of politics also came into it. The people who are meant to actually be beneficiaries of his houses were not the real beneficiaries. People who are well connected, some of them got some of his units. And the person that was meant to have it, people say, you don't have the wherewithal to also just have the upkeep to maintain that particular house. So for you, if you don't have a consistent income, how then will you maintain even that particular house? So they opt to rent it out. And by renting it out, they're not really benefiting, or we're not really achieving that particular goal of upgrading the slums or outfacing the slums in Majengo, which you are, of course, the MP of, in Kamkunji, in Kibera. Don't you think also this is not achieving what it was meant to do in the first place? Can we learn from that particular project so that we don't repeat the same mistake as we come to this housing levy?
Well, this is a very different argument from what I had supported. Obviously, there has been some terrible mistakes because of corruption, nepotism, incompetence in management in this particular sector. And there are, of course, people who have benefited undeservingly. What we need to do is to put into place institutions, rules and regulations that would make it difficult. And we need watchdogs like Parliament, the public sector, to be able to make sure that that kind of excesses or failures do not happen. But that is completely different from the idea of developing a public housing scheme that would benefit the majority of the Kenyan people, poor people who live in terrible housing conditions, like in Majengo, like in Shaurimoyo, like in Kiambiu in my neighborhood. These people really need support, and we need to change the quality of life of those people. But the other argument is whether this money is going to be spent well, whether it is going to be embezzled, is a different type of argument. And we need to make sure that we have the institutions, we have the legislations, and we take the necessary action. Because after all, Kenya is not going to be fixed by outsiders. Kenya is not going to be funded by donors' money. Kenya is ours. And whatever mistakes that there are, whatever shortcomings we have, we must correct them so that we can move forward. But I think much of the argument about the housing levy is political. It is political in the sense that it is not looking at the benefits and the impact that this is going to have in terms of creating employment, in terms of stimulating our economy, in terms of lifting millions of people who now live in deplorable conditions from poverty and underdevelopment, and providing them with decent housing. And I think this is a good thing for our country. It's a good thing for my constituency, and I think that we should consider it positively and objectively, rather than make it a political football. But let me again repeat that in fact the financial bill is broad. There are elements of it which I find very difficult to support, and we'll look at them when it's brought to the floor of the House.
Thank you. All right, let's hear from Wilson Sossion. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Debar.
So we have a Senator Omtata who's threatened to go to court regarding this particular development as well.
And that's democracy. People are free to litigate, and I think more than any other time, the housing debate is very hot in this country, and I encourage, let's continue discussing it, and it's a big discussion, and as a country we must plan our infrastructure. When Kibaki took over this country, our roads were in a terrible state, but with the road infrastructure and transport infrastructure that has been escalated to standard gauge railway, we can appreciate that an economy with decent road infrastructure is good enough. Now we are at 13 point something trillion GDP of an economy. The other infrastructure that is very essential is housing. It is housing. Without a good plan in housing, then we are not growing our economy, and we cannot have an organized nation. The bigger picture of the future, the long term, is that in the long term, we should be able to get a house for every citizen. There are 14 million households, and if we worked on this right from independence, we would not be having slums anywhere. We would not be having even poor housing in rural Kenya. We would be having decent housing. Number three, if you look at Germany in 1933, the land consolidation and the Green Revolution, it was accompanied by housing design and plan. Scientists predict that by 2050, if Kenya does not organize itself, we shall not be producing food for our own selves. Our land, our agriculture will have collapsed. Where Omogeni comes from, the land fragmentation and slamming of even the rural community is that bad. And therefore, the plan to have housing is a non-contested issue. It was in the manifesto of Azimio, it was in the manifesto of Kenya Kwanza. And Kenya Kwanza has taken a bold step to make sure that it is implemented now. And it will have to be implemented. And from the labor point of view, where I come from, as a labor leader of many years, a housing plan should not be debated. The question should be, how is it being implemented? And I think that should be the debate that we have around, because good housing design, and I want to believe across all the 290 constituencies, so that young Kenyans who are entering active labor market will automatically get houses. I was in Bahamas because I'm widely traveled globally. A teacher entering service in Bahamas one of the first benefit you get is a house. And that's a good social plan for any country to develop. And when you are getting a house, it means you are getting clean water, electricity, and there are the social amenities that are also available for the household. That is schools and hospitals. So this idea of housing comes with so many packages, and Kenya will be the first African country to have a clear housing design. This is a program that will go on for years and years. And the issues that were raised initially, I think have been addressed. What is the percentage contribution per employee? 3%. The employer, what is the matching contribution? 3%. You participate in the scheme, and what is the exit strategy? 1, you can choose to get a house. But if you don't get a house, you can exit after 7 years, get your money, or exit after 14 years, get your money. And you can transfer all the benefits to pension. And so it's not a loss, it's a win-win. It's changing the business of borrowing externally, because we are beggars internationally. And when we build domestic reserve that we can borrow, that we can partner, I think it does make a lot of sense. There are a lot of merits in this idea. And if you look at Azimio, where my brother comes from, this idea was discussed and agreed. And I dare confess here that the former president, Uhuru Kenyatta, sent Raila Odinga to me to accept deduction of 1.5%, which we did not object. And if you look at the labor unions, COTU Secretary General and affiliate unions have accepted. And the issue that I was talking about teachers here, the president has already engaged the entire leadership of KNUT, that was on Thursday, and KUPPET on Saturday, and they've agreed that is indeed a noble idea. The only challenge is looking at compensating the losses from the salaries of workers through salary reviews, which is a different matter. It's a different agenda altogether that can be addressed separately. But as we speak now, what the president has done to consult with the different groups, and he will continue consulting so that there is seamless implementation of this scheme, is very deep demand. And these houses are not going to be built for the president or for leaders in Kenya Kwanza. It's a plan, it's a master plan for Kenya. And 50 years from now, or at the 2063 agenda of Africa, Kenya will be a perfect example of solving human settlement by putting up decent housing. Now, if you marry two things, decent transport infrastructure and decent housing, complete with electricity and water, then you can imagine the type of country we will have. And in terms of consolidating farms and protecting agriculture, then by that time, we will be able to produce food scientifically and very well. So I think this is a noble idea that we must bite the bullet despite the difficult circumstances. This is the road that we must take, and I urge Parliament, and I'm happy, Member of Parliament of Kamugunji is agreeing. If this housing scheme was implemented right from independence, we would not be having slums in the city. Those people living in the slums without toilets, without water supply, it must concern all of us. And it's time all these indecent housing and poor settlement is eliminated in this country. Because our constitution is very clear, and Omogen is a lawyer. Right to decent housing, right to education, right to health, and this is part of the master plan to provide that. Why should we backtrack? And when are we going to do it? When is the economy going to be good enough to do that? There is no good moment that the economy will ever be good.
Thank you, Mr.
This is the beginning of revolution. And when it is time to engage in revolution, whether it's painful or sweet, let us do it, because we will definitely get the dividends of what we are doing.
Thank you.
I think the president is on the right track.
Right, thank you. It seems that this will sell through, because looking at the legislators from the Kenya Kwanza side, according to the Dailies as well, they're saying this will pass through, right, regardless or despite the fact that opposition will be opposing it as well. But if you look at the Daily Nation as well, before we take a short break, Ruto 62 billion shillings to Globetrot. That is what we have there as a splash today. It's all about spending. And presidency burst fully a budget in 7 months. It says taxpayers will fork out 2 billion shillings to facilitate President William Ruto's trips abroad if Parliament approves the budget proposals for the financial year starting July the 1st. The National Treasury has allocated 700 million shillings for the President's state visit, but MPs have now been told to add another 1.3 billion shillings. This continues on page 4 of the Daily Nation this morning, and we'll look at that in light of what we're talking about. Mheshimiwa, you said the issues of course, having grants, looking at maybe a that is a public-private partnership, PPP, to steamroll some of these projects. Should you maybe consider, or should we consider having PPPs to steamroll this housing levy instead of going the taxing way? Right? Let's take a short break. As we mull over that, we'll circle back with that.